"Make it fast, Chief. I won't beg," he said. But the Apache chief saw something else in him. The morning sun rose slowly over the wide land, painting the sky with soft colors of gold and pale blue. The air felt dry, and the wind moved gently across the tall grass, making it whisper like quiet voices. Near a small trail that cut through the land, a tired man walked with slow steps. His clothes were worn, his boots covered in dust, and his face showed the marks of many long days without rest. Still, he kept his back straight, even though every step felt heavy. He did not know exactly where the trail would lead. He only knew he could not turn back. The past followed him like a shadow. No matter how far he walked, he had left behind a life that no longer felt like his own. Memories of people he once loved and promises he could not keep stayed in his mind even when he tried to push them away. As he walked, he noticed the land changing. The trees grew closer together, and the air felt different, like he had crossed into another world.
He did not know it yet, but he was near an Apache camp.
The people there had lived on this land for many seasons, and they knew every sound the wind made and every track left on the ground. Before the man could react, a few figures stepped out from behind the trees. They did not rush him or shout. They simply stood there, calm and still, watching him with careful eyes. The man stopped walking. His heart beat faster, but he did not raise his hands or try to run. He had been running for too long already. One of them spoke in a low, steady voice. The man did not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. He was not alone anymore, and his journey had reached a moment he could not avoid. They guided him toward the camp. The path was quiet, and the man felt every step echo inside his chest. He expected anger or harsh treatment, but instead, he saw people going about their day. Children played near small fires, elders sat in the shade, and women worked with calm hands. Life continued around him, even as he felt like his own life was standing still. At the center of the camp stood the Apache chief. He was older, with hair touched by gray and eyes that seemed to see more than just what stood in front of him. The chief looked at the man for a long moment without speaking. The man felt like every choice he had ever made was being read in that quiet gaze. The silence felt heavy, so the man spoke. His voice was rough from dust and long days of little water. "Make it fast, Chief. I won't beg." The words surprised even him. He did not know why he said them. Maybe he was tired of hoping. Maybe he believed he did not deserve mercy. The people around them reacted with soft gasps and angry looks, but the chief raised a hand, and the camp fell quiet again. The chief stepped closer. He did not look angry, but he did not look pleased. He simply looked curious. A man expected to feel fear, but instead he felt something else. He felt seen. The chief noticed small things. The way the man stood straight, even when his body clearly wanted to bend. But the way his eyes did not move away, even when others stared at him with doubt. The way his hands, though dirty and rough, did not shake. Breath. The chief spoke, and though the man did not understand every word, he understood the tone. It was not a command. It was not a threat. It was a question. The man was led to a place near a small fire. The warmth felt good against his cold skin. Someone handed him a bowl of water. He hesitated, then took it with both hands and drank slowly. The water tasted better than anything he could remember. As the day passed, he sat there, watched, but not harmed. He could feel eyes on him, but they were not full of hate. They were full of questions. The wind picked up in the evening, carrying the smell of cooking food and the sound of quiet voices. The man felt tired in a way that went deeper than his body. He felt tired in his heart. He thought about the road that had brought him here. It had started with hope. He once believed he could build a simple life, one filled with honest work and peaceful nights. But things did not go as planned. A bad decision led to another, and soon he found himself losing the trust of those who mattered most to him. He remembered a small house he once called home. He remembered laughter, shared meals, and warm light coming through the windows at night. He also remembered the day he walked away, thinking it would fix everything. It did not. It only made the silence louder. The fire crackled, pulling him back to the present. Across the flames, the Apache chief sat down. The chief did not speak right away. He simply looked at the fire as if listening to it tell a story. After a while, the chief spoke softly. Psst. The man did not understand the words, but he felt the meaning in the tone. It was not about judgment. It was about time. The man looked up at the sky. The stars were starting to appear, one by one, like small lights placed carefully in the dark. He felt something he had not felt in a long time. He felt calm. The night grew cooler. Someone placed a simple blanket near him. He hesitated, then wrapped it around his shoulders. It smelled like smoke and clean air. He did not sleep right away. Desperate. He listened to the camp around him. He heard quiet laughter, soft footsteps, and the sound of the wind moving through the trees. It felt strange to be surrounded by life when he had spent so long feeling alone. The chief stood up and walked a short distance away, then turned back and looked at the man one more time. Their eyes met across the fire. In that moment, the man felt like he was standing at the edge of something new, even if he did not know what it was yet. The night passed slowly. Pray. When the man finally closed his eyes, he did not dream of running. He dreamed of standing still, of being part of something, even if only for a moment. Rest a few hours. As the first light of morning touched the sky, the man woke up to the sound of birds and soft voices. The camp was already moving, already alive. Pray. He sat up and looked around, unsure of what the day would bring. But for the first time in a long while, he did not feel like he needed to escape. The morning air felt cool and fresh, and the man stood slowly stretching his tired arms. The camp was already awake. Smoke rose from small fires, and people moved with calm purpose. Someone was carrying water in a clay bowl. Someone else was fixing a loose rope on a shelter. The man watched all of it, unsure where he fit in this quiet rhythm of life. The Apache chief approached him without warning. His steps were soft, almost silent on the ground. The man turned, ready to speak, but the chief lifted a hand and pointed toward the edge of the camp. Then he motioned for the man to follow. They walked together in silence. The man expected to be led away from the camp, maybe back to the trail. Instead, the chief stopped near a small group of elders who were sitting under a tree. The chief spoke to them in a calm voice. The elders looked at the man, not with anger, but with deep curiosity. One of them nodded slowly. The chief then handed the man a simple wooden container and pointed toward the river that flowed not far from the camp. The man understood. He was being asked to bring water.
He took the container and walked toward the river.
The path was narrow, lined with stones and low plants. As he walked, he felt eyes on his back. He did not know if he was being tested or trusted. Maybe it was both. Desperately, at the river, the water moved smoothly over the rocks, making a soft, steady sound. He knelt down and filled the container carefully. The water was cold and clear. As he stood, he caught his reflection in the surface. Bare. He barely recognized himself. His face looked older. his eyes tired. But behind the tiredness, he saw something else. He saw someone who still wanted to try. When he returned to the camp, he handed the water to an elder. The elder gave him a small nod and a faint smile. It was a simple moment, but it felt important. The chief then pointed toward a broken fence near the edge of the camp. A few wooden posts had fallen, and the rope that held them together was loose. The man walked over and began to work. He tightened the rope, pushed the posts back into the ground, and used small stones to hold them steady. His hands moved on their own, guided by years of doing small jobs just like this. As he worked, a young boy came and sat nearby, watching him with wide eyes. The boy did not speak, but he followed every movement. When the man finished, the boy stood up and clapped his hands once, proud and excited. The man could not help but smile. The day went on like this. The chief gave him small tasks, one after another, carrying wood, helping prepare food, walking with an elder who needed support. Each task was simple, but together they made him feel useful in a way he had not felt in a long time. As the sun climbed higher, the heat grew stronger. Sweat ran down his face, but he did not stop. He felt something inside him change. The heavy feeling in his chest began to lift, little by little. During a short rest, he sat in the shade of a tree. The chief came and sat across from him. They did not speak right away. The sound of the wind filled the space between them. Break. Finally, the chief spoke softly. The man did not understand every word, but he caught a few. The chief was asking about his past. Breath.
The man took a deep breath. He spoke slowly, choosing simple words.
He talked about the small house he once had, the people he loved, and the mistakes that pushed him away from them. He did not make excuses. He did not try to sound better than he was. He just told the truth as best he could. The chief listened without moving. His eyes stayed on the man's face, not in a hard way, but in a steady, patient way. When the man finished, he felt lighter, like he had set down a heavy pack he had been carrying for years. The chief said something in response, and though the man did not understand the words, he understood the meaning. It was not about the past. It was about what came next. In the afternoon, dark clouds began to gather in the distance. The wind picked up and the air felt thick. People in the camp started to move faster, securing shelters and bringing supplies inside. The man noticed a stack of wood near one of the fires that looked unstable. Without being asked, he walked over and fixed it, making sure it would not fall if the wind grew stronger. A woman nearby gave him a thankful look. Soon, the first drops of rain fell. They were soft at first, then stronger. The man helped pull a loose covering over one of the shelters. His clothes got wet, but he did not care. He felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. The storm did not last long, but it left the ground wet and the air cool. The sky cleared and the sun came back out, shining on the camp with a fresh, clean light. As evening came, people gathered near the fires again. Food was shared. The man was given a simple meal. He ate slowly, enjoying every bite. It was not just the food that felt good. It was the feeling of sitting among others instead of alone. Later, as the sky darkened, the Apache chief sat near the fire and began to tell a story. The man did not understand the words, but he watched the faces of the people around him. They smiled. They nodded. Some looked thoughtful. The chief's voice was calm and steady. It rose and fell like the wind. The man felt the story in his heart, even if he could not hear it in his own language. When the story ended, the chief looked at the man and said something short. The man did not understand the words, but he understood the look. Inspiration, not a command. The man nodded. That night, as he lay near the fire, wrapped in his blanket, he stared up at the stars again. They felt closer than before. He thought about the road behind him and the path ahead. For the first time, he did not feel like he was running from something. He felt like he was walking toward something. As he closed his eyes, he made a quiet promise to himself. Whatever happened next, he would face it. He would not turn away again. The camp grew quiet. The fire burned low. The wind whispered through the trees. The morning began with a soft light that spread slowly across the land. The man woke to the sound of birds and the quiet movement of people starting their day. The fire from the night before had turned into a small circle of warm ash. Psst. He sat up and rubbed his eyes, feeling a calm he had not known for a long time. He looked around the camp and noticed how everything felt familiar now. The shelters, the paths between them, the trees that stood like silent guards around the space. He was still an outsider, but he no longer felt invisible. A young girl ran past him, laughing as she chased a small dog. Her laughter floated in the air like a light song. The man smiled without thinking. It felt good to smile again. The Apache chief appeared nearby, speaking quietly with an elder. When he saw the man, he gave a small nod. It was not a big gesture, but it meant more than words. The man stood and walked toward him.
The chief pointed toward a group of people who were gathering near the edge of the camp.
They were preparing to walk to a nearby field where plants grew that they used for food and medicine. The man understood the signal and joined them. The path to the field was peaceful. Sunlight filtered through the leaves above, creating patterns on the ground. The air smelled fresh, mixed with the scent of earth and plants. The man walked beside an elder who moved slowly but with steady steps. As they walked, the elder spoke in a low voice. The man did not understand every word, but he listened closely. The elder pointed to different plants along the way, showing which ones were helpful and which ones should be left alone. The man nodded, trying to remember the shapes and colors. When they reached the field, everyone spread out and began their work. The man followed what others did. He pulled weeds, gathered leaves, and placed them into small baskets. His hands got dirty, but he did not mind. The work felt honest and real. At one point, he found a small plant that looked weak and bent. Instead of pulling it out, he gently pushed the soil around it, helping it stand straight. He did not know why he did it. It just felt right. As the sun climbed higher, the group took a breath. They sat in the shade and shed water. The man felt the cool drink run down his throat and sighed with relief. An elder began to tell a story. The man could not understand the words, but he watched the way the elder's hands moved and the way others leaned in to listen. The story seemed to be about a long journey and a person who had to choose between turning back and moving forward. The man felt like the story was meant for him, even if he could not understand it fully. When they returned to the camp, the chief was waiting near the fire. He spoke to the group and then looked at the man. The chief motioned for him to sit. The two of them sat across from each other, the fire between them. The flames moved gently, like they were breathing. The chief spoke slowly. This time, the man understood a little more. The chief was asking him to tell his story. The man took a deep breath. He had shared pieces of his past before, but now he felt ready to share more. Bashan. He talked about where he grew up, in a small town where everyone knew each other. He talked about the dreams he had as a young man, of building something strong and lasting. He talked about how he met someone who believed in him when he did not believe in himself. He paused often, choosing his words carefully. He did not want to make himself look better than he was. He wanted to be honest. He told the chief about the day everything changed. A choice he made that hurt someone he cared about. He did not go into details, but the pain in his voice was clear. He explained how he tried to fix things but only made them worse. How the shame grew so heavy that he felt like the only thing he could do was leave. As he spoke, the fire crackled softly. The chief listened without interrupting, his face calm and open. When the man finished, he felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Saying the words out loud made them real, but it also made them lighter. The chief spoke in return. His words were slow and steady. The man did not understand all of them, but he understood the heart behind them. Bask. The chief told the story of his own. He spoke about a time when he was younger and lost someone close to him. He talked about how anger and sorrow followed him for many seasons. He explained how he learned that carrying those feelings alone only made them heavier. The man listened closely. Even without understanding every word, he felt the truth in the chief's voice. The chief ended by pointing to the fire. He said something short and clear. The man understood. The fire does not judge what is thrown into it. It simply changes it into something else. The rest of the day passed quietly. The man helped repair a shelter that had been damaged by the storm from the day before. We worked alongside a young man from the camp. They did not speak much, but they worked well together, handing tools back and forth without needing to ask. As the sun began to set, the sky turned soft shades of orange and pink. The camp gathered near the fires again. Brief food was shared, and quiet laughter filled the air.
A small group of children sat near the man.
One of them handed him a smooth stone. The stone had a simple shape carved into it. The man held it in his hand, feeling its weight. He did not know what it meant, but he knew it was a gift. Later, the Apache chief stood and spoke to the camp. His voice carried across the open space. The people listened with respect. The chief then looked at the man and motioned for him to stand. The man's heart began to beat faster. He did not know what was about to happen. The chief spoke again, then placed a hand on the man's shoulder. The touch was light but steady. The camp remained quiet. The man did not understand the words, but he understood the moment. He was being welcomed, even if only for a time. The feeling surprised him. He had spent so long thinking he did not belong anywhere. That night, as the stars filled the sky, the man lay near the fire, holding the small stone in his hand. He thought about the choices that had brought him here. He thought about the people he had lost and the people he had just begun to know. He realized something important. The past would always be part of him, but it did not have to control where he went next. The wind moved through the trees, making a soft, steady sound. It felt like the land itself was breathing. The man closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, he felt ready to find out. The next morning arrived with a strong wind that moved across the land like a quiet warning. The man woke to the sound of leaves brushing against each other and the low hum of voices in the camp. The sky was clear, but the air felt tense, as if something unseen was on its way. He sat up and noticed people moving faster than usual. Some were tying ropes around the shelters. Others were gathering supplies and placing them in safe spots. The man stood and looked around, unsure of what was happening. The Apache chief walked toward him, his face calm but focused. He pointed toward the far side of the camp, where dark clouds were slowly forming on the edge of the horizon. The man followed the direction of his hand and felt a small chill in his chest. The chief spoke in a steady voice, then motioned for the man to come with him. They walked together through the camp. The man noticed how the chief spoke to different people, giving short, clear instructions. Everyone listened and moved with purpose. The chief stopped near a group of young men and handed the man a bundle of rope. He pointed toward a shelter that looked loose and weak. The man understood what he needed to do. He walked over and began to tie the rope tightly around the wooden poles. The wind pulled at the fabric of the shelter, but he worked carefully, making sure every knot was strong. One of the young men helped him hold the pole steady. They did not speak much, but their actions showed trust. As they finished, a loud sound came from the sky. But it was not thunder, but the deep rush of strong wind moving through the trees. Leaves flew across the ground, and dust rose into the air. The man felt his heart beat faster, but he stayed where he was. He had run from too many things in his life. He did not want to run now. The chief walked through the camp, checking on everyone. Breath. When he reached the man, he gave a small nod. The man felt a strange sense of pride. The wind grew stronger, and the first drops of rain began to fall. They were light at first, but soon they became steady. The ground turned dark as it soaked up the water. People moved inside the shelters. The man followed, helping an elder who walked slowly. He held the shelter open while the elder stepped inside, then tied the rope closed to keep the wind out. Inside, the air felt warm and safe. The sound of rain hitting the roof was loud but calming, like a steady drum. Passed. They waited as the storm passed. The man sat on the ground, his back against a wooden pole. He listened to the voices around him. Some people spoke softly. Some laughed quietly, trying to keep spirits high. The man thought about his own past storms, the hard days when everything felt like it was falling apart. He remembered how alone he had felt during those times. Sitting here now, surrounded by people, he realized how different this felt. After a while, the rain slowed. Burbeck. The wind softened. The storm moved on. When they stepped outside, the land looked fresh and clean. The air smelled new. Puddles reflected the sky, and small streams of water ran between the plants. The man took a deep breath. It felt like the storm had washed something away inside him, too. The chief called everyone together near the center of the camp. People gathered in a wide circle. The man stood among them, feeling both nervous and curious. The chief spoke in a clear voice. He talked for a long time, using his hands to show his meaning. The people listened closely. The man did not understand the words, but he watched the faces around him. He saw respect, agreement, and thoughtfulness. When the chief finished, he looked at the man. He motioned for him to step forward. The man's chest tightened. He walked slowly to the center of the circle. All eyes were on him. The chief spoke again, this time pointing to the man, then to the camp, then to the land around them. The meaning was simple and powerful. The man realized the chief was talking about choice, about being part of something, about walking a path with others instead of alone. The chief placed something into the man's hands. It was a simple band made from woven plant fibers. It was not fancy, but it was strong. The man held it carefully. He did not know exactly what it meant, but he knew it was important. The people around them nodded. Some smiled. The man felt his eyes grow warm. He had not expected this. He had come to this place, ready for the worst. Instead, he was being given something gentle and kind. The chief placed the band around the man's wrist. The touch was light but meaningful. The man did not speak. He did not need to. He simply bowed his head slightly, showing his thanks in the only way he could. The day went on with a lighter feeling in the air. People returned to their work, but there was more laughter now. Ha 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 ha! The children ran and played in the wet grass, their feet splashing in small puddles. The man helped gather fallen branches from the storm.
He carried them to a fire pit and stacked them neatly. A woman nearby showed him how to place them so they would burn evenly.
As they worked, she spoke to him in a gentle voice. He did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. It was friendly, open. He smiled and nodded. It felt good to be part of simple, shared work.
In the afternoon, the chief asked the man to walk with him. They moved away from the camp, following a narrow path that led to a small hill.
But top, they could see the land stretching out in all directions. The river shone in the sunlight, and the trees moved softly in the breeze. The chief pointed to different parts of the land as he spoke. He talked about the seasons, the animals, and the people who had lived here long before. The man listened quietly. Breath. Even without understanding every word, he felt the deep connection the chief had with this place. The chief then turned to the man and spoke more softly. He placed a hand on his own chest, then on the man's chest. The meaning was clear. The land was not just something you walked on. It was something you carried inside you. A man nodded. He felt the truth of it. They stood there for a long moment, just looking at the world below. When they returned to the camp, the sun was beginning to lower in the sky. Bas, the light turned warm and golden. People gathered near the fires again. Food was prepared and shared. The man sat among them, listening to the mix of voices and laughter. A young boy came and sat next to him, pointing at the band on his wrist. The boy smiled and gave a small thumbs up. Inspiration. The man laughed softly. It felt good to laugh. As the night came, the stars filled the sky once more. The firelight danced on the faces around him. The chief stood and told another story. This one felt lighter, and people laughed more often. The man did not understand the words, but he enjoyed the feeling of being part of the moment. When the fire burned low, people began to settle down for the night. The man laid back on his blanket, looking up at the stars. He held his wrist up, looking at the simple band. He thought about the road he had walked to get here. He thought about the mistakes he had made and the weight he had carried. For the first time, he felt like that weight was not just his to carry anymore. He felt like he had been given a place, even if it was only for a short while. The wind moved gently through the trees, soft and calm. The man closed his eyes with a small smile on his face. Tomorrow would bring new choices, new steps, and new paths. But tonight he rested with the feeling that he was no longer walking alone. The final morning came quietly, almost shy, as if it did not want to interrupt the peace of the camp. The man woke before the sun rose. The sky was still dark, but a thin line of light rested on the edge of the land, promising a new day. He sat up slowly and looked around. Breaths. The shelters were still. The fires were low, only small red points glowing in the ash. The air felt cool and clean against his skin. He touched the simple band on his wrist and took a deep breath. He knew, deep inside, that this day would be different. He stood and walked toward the edge of the camp. The land was quiet, and the only sound he heard was the soft call of birds waking up. He did not walk far. Breath. He just wanted a moment alone with his thoughts. He thought about the road he had walked to get here, the long days of dust and silence, the nights when the stars felt too far away, the heavy feeling in his chest that never seemed to leave him, and now Here he was, standing in a place where people had shown him kindness without asking for anything in return. He felt grateful. He also felt unsure. Behind him, he heard footsteps. He turned and saw the Apache chief walking toward him. The chief's face was calm like always, but his eyes were thoughtful. They stood together, looking at the land as the sun slowly rose. Light spread across the river, the trees, and the wide open space beyond. The chief spoke softly. The man did not understand the words, but he understood the feeling. It was about beginnings. It was about endings. The man nodded, breaths. They walked back to the camp together. People were waking up now. Fires were being stirred. Someone was carrying water. A child laughed as he ran past. The man felt a small ache in his chest. There is no more. He did not want to leave this place. But he also knew he could not stay forever. The chief gathered a few people near the center of the camp. The man stood with them, feeling both nervous and calm. The chief spoke for a short time. The people listened. Breaths. Some nodded. Some looked at the man with gentle eyes. An elder stepped forward and placed a small bundle into the man's hands. It was wrapped in cloth and tied with a simple string. The man untied it carefully. Inside were a few pieces of dried food and a small carved charm made from wood. The charm had a simple shape, smooth and worn. The man looked up, unsure what to say. The elder smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. The touch was light, but warm. The chief stepped forward and spoke again. He pointed down the trail that led away from the camp, then pointed to the man's chest. The meaning was clear. The path was his to walk, but what he had learned here would go with him. The man felt his throat tighten. He took a step forward and then stopped. He turned to face the chief and the people of the camp. He placed a hand over his heart and bowed his head slightly. It was the only way he knew how to say thank you. The chief returned the gesture with a small nod. The man took a few steps toward the trail, then looked back one last time. The camp stood behind him, simple and strong, full of quiet life and shared moments. He felt a part of him stay there, even as he turned away. The trail stretched out in front of him, winding through the land like a promise and a challenge at the same time. Narration. He began to walk. At first his steps were slow. He kept looking back, as if he might change his mind. But with each step, he felt something inside him grow stronger. He thought about the mistakes he had made, the people he had hurt, the things he wished he could change. He knew he could not go back and fix everything, but he could go forward and do better. As the sun climbed higher, the land around him came alive. Birds flew overhead. The wind moved through the grass. The river shimmered in the distance. The man felt like he was seeing the world clearly for the first time. In a long while, he walked until the camp was no longer in sight. When he stopped, he took out the small carved charm and held it in his hand. He thought about the chief's words, even if he could not understand them fully. He thought about the fire, the stories, the simple work, and the feeling of being welcomed. He tied the charm to a small cord and placed it around his neck, letting it rest against his chest. It was not just a gift. It was a reminder. He continued down the trail, feeling lighter with every step. As the day went on, he reached a small crossing where the path split in two. He stopped and looked at both directions. For a moment, he felt that old feeling of doubt rise inside him. Which way was right? He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He thought about the chief pointing to his chest. He thought about the land being something you carry inside. When he opened his eyes, he knew. He chose a path and began to walk again. Hours later, he came across a small farm near the edge of the land.
A man and a woman were working in the field.
They looked up as he approached. The man raised a hand in greeting. The woman smiled. The traveler felt nervous, but he did not turn away. He walked up and spoke in a calm voice, asking if they needed help with anything. He did not ask for food or a place to stay. He just offered his hands. They looked at each other, then nodded. He spent the rest of the day helping them fix a fence and carry water. The work was hard, but it felt good. When the sun began to set, they offered him a simple meal. They sat together and ate, sharing quiet words and small laughs. As night came, the traveler lay on the ground near their home, looking up at the stars. They felt familiar now, like old friends. He touched the charm on his chest and smiled softly. He did not know where the road would lead him next. He did not know what challenges waited ahead. But he knew one thing. He was no longer running. He was walking with purpose, with care, and with a heart that had learned how to open again. The wind moved gently across the land, carrying the quiet promise of many new mornings to come.